Lord Jesus, we give our lives to you. We ask that you would help us to have faith in you beyond that of our own. Lord, that we would have a faith so strong that takes us through the challenging times in life. Lord, I pray that we would have a faith in you that helps us to trust others as well. God, I pray that you would give us confidence in our relationships with one another, that you would help us to be able to find folks to whom we can really be accountable to in life. Lord, we love you and pray this in your holy name. Amen. You may be seated. We want to welcome you to Stillwater Church this morning. We're so thankful that you braved the snow and joined us for worship today. We're in a message series where we've been talking about discovering God's will in our lives. We've talked about a number of ways that we can better understand God's will. And one of the ways that we've talked about is that we can better understand God's will through our relationships with others. God can speak to us through prayer, through His Word, through many other ways, but one of the ways that God speaks is through other people who love Jesus, and they love us, and they want for us to be the best person that we can be. Of course, to make this work, we have to trust others. How are you at trusting other people? Think in your life. Who are some people in your life where you would say, I really trust this person? Is there anybody? Is there anybody that you'd say, yeah, I really put a lot of trust, a lot of faith in that person and in what they say? For most of us, we have differing levels of trust depending on what environment that we're in. There may be some environments where you feel that you can trust pretty much nobody, and other environments where you feel like you can trust most everybody who are around you. If we think of areas or environments of low trust, I was trying to think of which ones I had been in that were environments of kind of low trust. Probably the lowest would be a prison, right? I got to go to prison this past year with some of our Kairos folks. I know a number of you have done that before. And that is an environment of very low trust. You don't get to leave to go to the bathroom on your own, right? You don't get to do anything that you want to do without somebody else supervising, without somebody else being part of that. And so I was looking up online, I found an interesting article on how to survive in a federal prison. I don't know if any of you find yourself to be experts on this or not. If so, you can just kind of plug your ears through this point. But for the rest of us, if you ever were to end up in a federal prison for whatever reason, here are a few tips. Number one, bite your tongue. You're going to need to learn how to keep your mouth shut, so why not start at your sentencing? You can't make it any better at this point. So if you're going to prison, learn to bite your tongue. People who go in and they run their mouths a lot, they're not generally well liked by others. Second, don't trust anyone. This goes for guards, other prison officials, and the person in the cell next door. If someone is being nice to you, ask yourself, what's in it for him or her? Because you can't trust anybody. Number three, hide your emotions. If you want to look tough, do not show fear, anger, happiness, or pain. Emotions are your worst enemy in prison because they reveal your weaknesses, and others can use those weaknesses to prey on you. So don't show your emotions to anybody else. It's another way you make it in prison. Number four, choose your words carefully. Potentially anything that you say to other guards, other prisoners, or anybody else can be taken out of context and used to hurt you, manipulate you, or other bad things. So choose your words carefully. Number five, it's one of my favorite, don't stare at the other prisoners. Should have been self-explanatory, right? But no matter how interesting that tattoo looks, don't stare at the guy because, as it says here, although you're simply curious, the other person can completely misinterpret what is happening. So don't stare at the other prisoners. Number six, perhaps equally as obvious, don't be a snitch. People who tell tales to guards are despised by everything and can be physically attacked. Or as our friend say, snitches get stitches, right? Don't want to be a snitch. Number seven, don't ask the staff to solve your problems. That's not going to work out well. That doesn't tend to have the other inmates like you very well. And finally, number eight, it says this, get used to new rules. And I quote, above all, remember that the normal rules of the outside world simply don't apply any longer. When you're in prison, you're living in a different planet where all that matters to you is surviving the experience with as little damage as possible. So get used to the new rules. Get used to this new way of low-trust life because the old rules, they don't apply anymore. You're in a totally different world now. I don't know about you, but reading those things makes me appreciate the fact that I'm not going to be living in prison today, right? Hopefully none of you read that and said, ooh, I would like to go visit there sometime. Maybe spend a few years or decades. Sounds like fun. That would be kind of crazy, wouldn't it? Because this environment of such low trust, it's no fun. I mean, we love our freedom. We love having the freedom to come and go as we please. It's such a good thing to choose our close friends, to choose who we can trust. All these things, they matter so much to us. In fact, as human beings, we are wired to love our freedom and to love to be able to be in trusting relationships with other people. If you doubt this, just think about children. Children love to tell everybody everything. Have you ever had a conversation with a 5-year-old? There's not really many secrets in that conversation, is there? For us, we sent our kids last summer back to their grandparents' house back in Illinois. We sent them for about a week, and they went back, and we would occasionally talk to them on the phone, just see how they're doing, kind of get our kid fixed for a little bit. And we talked with them. We talked first with Grandma, and we said, how's it going? How's everybody doing? They sleeping okay? Oh, yeah, everybody's doing great. They're sleeping great. Everything's well. So that's great. We're happy to hear it. Then we talked to the 5-year-old, and we said, how's things going? He said, oh, I'm tired. Really? Why are you tired? He goes, well, because Grandma lets me sleep in the living room now with the TV on all night. Really? That's kind of funny, because what we said to Grandma is we want him in bed by 9 p.m. and no TV on. Why don't you put Grandma back on the phone? We need to have a chat, right? Because Grandma doesn't seem to care about what this is going to do to me next week, right? And that's kind of what I care about. But kids, they tell you everything. They'll rat on whatever it is. Grandma can feed them ice cream for supper, and they're going to tell you, Grandma fed me ice cream for supper, even though that's probably going to get them in trouble. They don't care, because they just tell you everything. In fact, we've got a quick video clip about this. Let's check this out. Kids say everything, right? They'll tell you about the failed test pilot experience, about the fact that they're grounded to go to your house now because you're a loser. They don't care. They just say it because that's how kids are. There's not really that filter. And as we grow a little bit, we learn that that's irresponsible. It's irresponsible to tell everybody everything all the time. That we need to have a better filter than that. It's not kind, it's not loving, it's not really helpful. It's kind of strange to do that. So we learn that we need to dial it back a little bit. Instead of telling everybody everything all the time, we need to pick and choose a little bit more carefully who we can trust. We get further along and we hit the teenage years, and we stop talking to some specific people who are our parents. Exactly, that's right. We don't let them in at all. We put the walls up for sure. But we kind of put the walls up for a lot of people. But instead, what we do is we focus all that attention on our select group of friends. We've got maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 friends who we care about, and they're close to us, and we talk to them a lot. Or maybe it's a boyfriend, girlfriend. We tell them everything. Maybe we tell them things we shouldn't tell them, but we still tell them all this stuff because we haven't really lost that childlike wanting to tell everybody stuff. But by the same token, we've become a little more mature and realized that we shouldn't tell everybody everything all the time. And it's good because we need friends. We need friends who are close to us, who love us, who care about us, because they help us look more and more like Christ. Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, a friend sharpens a friend. Your friends can help you be more and more like God. Your friends can help you follow God's will for your life. Your friends can help you to grow in faith. It's an amazing thing that God has given us. We need friends. And as we get even older, we go through college or our first job or whatever comes next, and we have some other relationships in life, and then we become adults, and we start to get out into the real world with its great things and also with its problems and its pains. And almost inevitably what happens is we get burnt along the way. We get hurt from time to time. We put our trust in people, and some of them, they let us down. That maybe you tell them the secret and they tell everybody else your big secret. Or maybe you put your trust in them and confide some big dream or aspiration that you have, and they just laugh at it. They say, there's no way you can do that. What are you thinking? You must be crazy. Or maybe you got married and you committed your life to somebody else, and you both said, we'll be in this till death do us part, and then they left. And it wasn't till death do us part anymore. Or maybe you were in some relationship where you were hurt or mistreated. And very quickly we learn that trust is a big risk. Trust is a big risk. It's not as simple as it felt in childhood when we just told everybody everything all the time and it was fine. It's risky business. Because when you trust somebody and you invite them into that sacred space of your life, you also give them the chance to hurt you. You give them the chance to abuse that trust, to misuse that trust. And so we get very good at limiting ourselves, at creating this kind of managed version of us that we'll let others see. We get very good at kind of putting on this mask, if you will. It says, this is the part of me that everybody else can see. It may not even be the real me, but this is the part that I think the world would rather see. So I'm going to always be the happy person. No matter what the circumstances are, I've got a smile on my face because I'm going to be happy all the time. And that's going to be me. That's my mask. Or maybe you go the other way. Say, I'm always going to be the cranky person. Whatever's happening outside, I'm going to have kind of an Eeyore look on my face because there's always something to be down about, right? Or maybe it's somewhere in the middle. Maybe you put on the athleticism face, or you put on the artistic face, or you put on the you name it face, or the workaholic face, or whatever it may be. We put these things on, and they mask us. They hide us. They let us kind of stay behind those things, and we decide that that is safer. It's a safer way to live because then nobody can really get to me. Nobody can really hurt me anymore. Nobody can really get into those deep and sacred spaces in my life. And you know, a lot of folks live their whole lives in this way. A lot of folks go for years, for decades, until their dying day, and they don't really know anybody. They haven't felt like they've really known anybody. I mean, really been fully known by somebody since they were kids or teens or maybe young adults. How tragic. It's kind of ironic. We talked about prison living earlier, and even though we're a free people, when we do this, we put ourselves back in prison. When we refuse to trust others, to let a select one or two or three or four people into that sacred space, we imprison ourselves, and really the same rules apply. You remember what those are? Bite your tongue. We don't want to say what we feel like saying because there's nobody in life that we can really trust to listen to us. There's nobody in life that we really can trust and are willing to just share openly with, to share honestly with, and know that we have that relationship of love where it's going to be okay. Or second, we don't trust anybody. We just kind of keep them all at an arm's length. And we make it seem like we trust some, but in reality what we're doing is keeping this closed-off area of our life where nobody is allowed to come in. And for some of us, that's the majority of our life. For others, that's a smaller section, but we keep that area closed off. We hide our emotions. We don't want others to see us be too happy or too sad or too whatever. We just want to be cool all the time because it's risky to show your emotions. When you show your emotions, somebody else might use you or might manipulate you. We choose our words carefully. We don't stare at the other prisoners. Now, maybe it's not prisoners in our lives, but we don't look too closely at each other. I don't mean like awkward staring, but I mean we keep this relational distance. It says, I'm not really going to be too loving to this person because, again, I don't want to get too close. I'd rather just keep them kind of at this arm's length because when they're out that far, they can't get in and hurt me near as easily. Don't be a snitch. Now, of course, tattletaling, not a good way of life, but we don't ever want to talk to others about the weaknesses that they see that we see in their lives. If you've got somebody in your life who you're really close to and you really trust, and they're doing something that they shouldn't be, you want to be able to say something, to say, hey, I don't think that's your best way of living. I'm not sure that that's really what God has for you. Are you sure that you should treat your spouse that way? Are you sure that you should be doing this, that, or the other thing that we're talking about here? And we don't do that with anybody because, again, we don't want to let anybody in. Finally, number 7, we don't ask the staff to solve our problems. Remember, I talked about that with prisoners. And in real life, we don't want to get help. We don't want to seek the help of a counselor or a doctor or a financial advisor or whatever it is that you're struggling with because, again, we don't want to put our trust in that. We want to have this nice like cocoon, this shell, this mask that we have around us that looks all nice and pretty and perfect. And if I went to see somebody for help, maybe others would realize that I don't have it all together. And it's not a good way of living. Finally, we get used to the new rules. We get used to this as our standard way of living. We can't really trust anymore, and so we're just going to live this way. For the rest of our lives, we're going to keep everybody else out because we've just accepted that this is the best it can be. We don't want to take the risk of being hurt, and so we do this. And the tragedy is we create this prison for ourselves, and it stinks. It's not how God intended us to live. God intended us to live in community with others. Now, that doesn't mean that you share with everybody everything every time. That would be nuts. But God intended us to have a few people in our lives who we let into that sacred space, who we don't have to be managed around, who we don't have to put on these masks around, who we love and we know they love us just because we are. That's it. It's not performance-based. They don't love us because we're doing something for them or because we're impressive or something like us. They love us because we exist, because we have this friendship, we have this closeness, we have this love for one another. So what are some roadblocks that get in the way? Because we all have roadblocks that get into the way of having this kind of, I guess we're talking about like a micro community, this close-knit group of friends, this accountability group, these people who we really trust ourselves into. Some roadblocks to these relationships. First of all, we love to compete. If you're taking notes, these are in your notes. We love to compete. I'm a competitive person. Many of us, we love to play sports or games or whatever, and it's a good thing. But sometimes it can go too far in life. Sometimes we can be competitive like with everybody else. So we don't want to really be known by anybody, say at work, because maybe you're competing for that promotion with that person. And if they knew you too well, maybe, just maybe, it might limit your chances of getting that promotion. Or we compete with people in our family. Maybe you're competing with siblings for your parents' time and energy. Or maybe you're competing with somebody else for love or for attention or for resources, whatever it may be. Or in other areas of your life. You're competing in your little friend group for this, that, or the other thing. And so instead of really trusting others, we kind of use them as a ladder. We step on them on our way to the top because we think that that's the best way to advance ourselves. And it's ironic because actually the opposite thing is true. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 9 says this, 2 people can accomplish more than twice as much as one. They get a better return for their labor. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But people who are alone when they fall are in real trouble. If you've ever fallen, you know that it stinks. If you've fallen by yourself, it's even worse. Because who's there to help you up? Who's there to help you up? And if you fell in your life today, who would be there to reach out that hand to help you up? Solomon here talks about some interesting math. He says that 2 are better than 1. That 2 people can accomplish more than twice as much as 1. He's basically saying that 1 plus 1 does not always equal 2. Because when 2 people are together, they can accomplish more than just the sum of what they could on their own. So in God's economy, 1 plus 1 can equal 3 or 5 or 15 because God can take that relationship that you have and when you are together as one can do so much more than he could ever do with just the 2 of you separate. I remember in my life when Jennifer and I were going through premarital counseling together, and the pastor said, one of the primary reasons you should evaluate whether or not you should be married is this. Do you believe that God can do more with John plus Jennifer than God could ever do with John and Jennifer on their own? And we wrestled with that. We investigated that a lot. Do we really think that God could use us to do more as a couple than God could use on our own? And we strongly believe that to be yes. We're just in year 12 of that. We got a long, long ways to go in growth with that. But we found that to be very true. God can do so much more with you when you're willing to trust yourself to others, to be in real relationship, real accountability with others. Don't let competition get in your way. You know, as I look at in my own life, at my micro community, there's a few guys in my life who I trust fully. These are my brothers. I love them very, very much. And one of them, we actually grew up together. And I remember growing up, we would compete in everything. We're both into sports and into competition. And my friend Paul, he was always a step better than me in everything. he was one of those guys that no matter what the sport was, he picked it up like that. And so we would be, we'd have our little basketball tournaments. We'd always have to stack Paul's team to be worse because he was so much better than all of us. He was always a little bit bigger and a little bit stronger, a little bit better. I remember Paul went out for wrestling, and none of the rest of us went out for wrestling, and we were having this sleepover, and Paul wanted to wrestle with everybody. So we wrestled, and I remember me and my friend, we decided to both wrestle Paul simultaneously, and it took him 20 seconds to pin both of us. It was ridiculous. We couldn't even stop him when we were teaming up on him. And we were so competitive, and I didn't really like him that much through some of those years because I was competing with him all the time, and I was always losing. Who always wants to be losing? And as we grew older and we grew in maturity, our relationship changed a lot because we realized that, hey, we can compete and have fun, and it doesn't matter who wins or loses, but really we love each other, we care about each other, and that's what matters. It doesn't matter who wins a basketball court or this, that, or the other. What matters is this love and care that we have for one another. So our competition can get in the way. The second roadblock can be this. We are arrogant. As human beings, we are naturally arrogant. At the root of virtually every sin is pride. Because at some point we are saying to God, God, I'm going to choose my way in this situation, not your way. I know what your way is, but I've decided that my way is going to be preferable in this situation. And that's arrogant. And we let our arrogance kind of flow into our other relationships with other people as well. And this certainly causes a lot of distance between us and others. And it's a roadblock to really accountable relationships because it causes us to not want to seek help. Like, for example, have you ever had a friend who was going through a hard time? Let's use an easy example, a hard time in their marriage. And you didn't know it until right before everything broke loose, whether they separated or they got a divorce or something bad happened. And you thought, man, why didn't we talk about this a long time ago? Because that didn't happen overnight. We didn't get there overnight. Why didn't we talk about this earlier? We could have helped earlier. Sometimes we see this in the church. Folks will come to me with a problem like that, and it's like a couple will come in, and they've scheduled like a 10 a.m. meeting with me to talk about their marriage and a 2 p.m. meeting with the lawyer to go get a divorce. And it's like, we've missed it. Where were you 2 months ago, 2 years ago, or 2 decades ago when these things started? Well, we were being a little arrogant, weren't we? We were so certain that we had to have this pretty face on that says we don't have any problems and there's nothing wrong here and we're going to keep everybody else out. And yet below the surface, things were bubbling and boiling and there was big problems and we didn't ever seek help. And our arrogance can distance us from others, and our arrogance can distance us from the will of God in our lives. Because if you don't give somebody else the opportunity to speak into your life in this way, you're never going to fully understand God's will for your life. Say that again. If you don't have anybody that loves Jesus and loves you and is willing to be just painfully honest with you, you're never going to fully understand God's will for your life. Do you think you really see it perfectly? Do you think that you really understand yourself through an unbiased lens? That you can really know every time that you're in the wrong? I don't think any of us are capable of doing that. That's why God says that we need other people. That's why 2 can be so much stronger than 1. That 1 plus 1 can equal 3 or 5 or 15. Because when we really listen to others, when we really are in accountable relationships with others, God can use that to bring about such good things in our lives. Galatians 6:2. Share each other's troubles and burdens, and in this way obey the law of Christ. Who in your life can you share your troubles, your burdens with? If something really went wrong in your life today, one of your key relationships or at your job or something else, who would you call? Who would share your troubles or your problems? Who would be willing to get in a car immediately and drive for hours to be there at your side? Or who would drive across town? Or who would you pick up the phone and talk to? If there's nobody, friends, it's time to start making steps in those directions. It won't be something you just build overnight, but it's time to start making steps in those directions. The third roadblock that we have is that we are afraid of intimacy. We are afraid of intimacy. Is love really worth the risk of being known by others? Is it really worth that risk? This fear has often come out due to very viable concerns where our trust has been violated before. And we've said, I'm not going to trust anymore. I'm not going to take that risk. I'm not going to let anybody in close to me. I'm not going to be willing to have that level of intimacy with anybody else because it's just not worth the risk. And so we push others out. We keep them at a distance. Even those who we love the most, who are our closest people, we still keep them at arm's length because we have this fear. What if they hurt me? What if they mistreated me? What if? And naturally, we don't want to let people in irresponsibly. We don't just let everybody into this sacred space. That would be dangerous. But there's got to be some for whom we're willing to let down the guards. We're willing to put our hands down a little bit and say, I am going to trust myself fully to you. I'm going to be fully known by you. There's no question that you can't ask me. There's nothing that's off limits because I love you, I care about you, and I know that you love and care about me and want God's best for me. And I want God's best for you as well. Are you willing to do that with anybody? If not, what would it take for you to put down that roadblock? Philippians 1, verse 9 says this, I pray that your love for each other will overflow more and more, that you will keep on growing in knowledge and understanding. For I want you to understand what really matters, so that you may live pure and blameless until Christ returns. Who in your life do you experience that kind of love with? That overflowing love that helps you to live pure and blameless in your life? Who loves you with that kind of love? If you don't have that, friend, you're missing out. Fear of intimacy does not exist when real love overflows. Our wounds, our dashed dreams, the struggles of making ends meet that we all have, our struggles with our spouse, our struggles with our kids, our struggles at work, all these areas that struggles with our dreams, our struggles with the fact that maybe people don't want to listen to us or hear our ideas anymore, our struggles with those deep pains that are inside of us. Who do we trust those things with? It is a really lonely life to bear those things on your own. God didn't create you to carry all these things on your own. Two are stronger than one. For when one stumbles, the other can be there to help them back up, to help them to walk again. So we need this kind of micro community in our life. Do you have it? Well, here's a couple ways to know. First, if you look at this image, let's put you as the top person there in the orange at the top, okay? This is kind of like you and the rest of the world. And you see these tiers of people. The bottom group there is your sidewalk people, okay? These are the people that you just see day in, day out in life. One of the ways that you know if you have this kind of community in your life is that you have some people in your life that you listen to in a different way than you listen to everybody else. Let's say that there's something in your life that you have an opinion on. Let's say that the issue is, are you a good spouse? Okay? Yes or no. Are you a good spouse? And you believe that the box should be checked, yes, I am a good spouse. Okay? Now, if one of these people on the street sees you and comes up to you and says, I'm not so sure that you're a good spouse. Like, let's say that you leave the restaurant and you go to get in your car and you don't open the car door for your spouse, okay? And someone comes up to you and says, hey, if you were a good spouse, you would have opened that door for them. What are you going to do? Are you going to say, woe is me, I had no idea I was such a horrible person, I will change my behavior? Not likely, right? Are you going to pop them in the face? I don't know what you're going to do to them. But you're probably not going to be pleased with them, right? Who's this person? What kind of right do they have to criticize me? They don't even know what they're talking about here, okay? So that's your sidewalk people. Your next group of people is your friends or acquaintances. These are people that you know, you're not particularly close with, but you would know them. Some of them go to this church, some of them you work with, some you're related to, maybe they're in your neighborhood. And so these would be people that we're a little bit closer with. So again, you believe the box is checked, yes, I am a good spouse. And one of them says, no, I'm not sure that you're such a good spouse. You know, your neighbor whatever. You don't really know your neighbor that well, but, you talk across the fence sometimes. And, one time you're out and you're having a little disagreement with your spouse, and they say, hey, you know what? If you were a good spouse, you wouldn't have that disagreement, right? Again, are you going to change your behavior because of that? Probably not. You're going to say, we need to argue indoors from now on, right? Those nosy neighbors, man, get on my nerves. That's kind of your general community, people that you know, okay? That third tier up there, these are your closer friends. Not just people that you know, but these are people you actually like knowing, like being around, enjoy their company, and you're close to them. You have a lot of shared space together. You value them, they're important to you, but you still have that certain mask. You still have that certain distance. There are spaces in your life they are not allowed to talk about. They're not allowed in. There are questions that they could ask that you're not really going to answer honestly, okay? Because they're still kind of a tier down. If they were to say that, if they were to speak into your life, I'm betting that you would say, that kind of bothers me that my friend Joe would say that about me. It might make me pause a little bit, but at the end of the day, I'm going to say, well, Joe doesn't really know the whole situation. He doesn't really understand all these other things. He doesn't really understand, say he overheard some argument. Joe doesn't really understand what my spouse said to me before that argument, because clearly if Joe wouldn't be criticizing me, right? And so we tend to think of it in those terms. We don't really change behavior. And finally, that top group, this is your micro community. This is what we've been focusing on this morning. And this is the group that, honestly, the majority of us may not have anybody in this category. A couple ways that you would know. First of all, is there anybody in your life for whom if we take last year, let's say 2013, and let's take your big screw-ups of last year. We've all got them. Take your big screw-ups from last year. Is there anybody in your life who would not be surprised to know any of those? Because you've told them. You've had honest conversation. You've said, I messed up here, I sinned here, or I made a bad choice here, or I did this, that, or the other. Is there anybody who honestly would not be surprised by all of those put together? If not, you don't have this. I can tell you assuredly, you don't have this if there's nobody in your life you trust in that way. This group is the one that we give authorship rights to in our lives. And what I mean is we give them the freedom and the responsibility to speak into our lives in a way that will change our behavior. So I believe the box is checked. I'm a good spouse. And my micro community says to me, actually, the box is checked, no. You are not a good spouse. Here's what you are doing that is inconsistent with good spouse behavior. And we're seeing this in your life, and these things, they've got to change because we love you, and we want you to be the best you can be. We want you to follow God's guidance, and you're not when you're doing these things. If you've got these kinds of people, and they tell you that, and you disagree, because we do disagree. We always want to think we're the one in the right in all situations. And if you're in this situation and they tell you, you think the box is checked yes, but we're telling you, friend, it's checked no, then from that day forward, you live as if that box is checked no. Why? Because they said it. Because you give them that kind of authorship in your life that you say, I'm going to trust you to be God's voice in my life in this situation. So I'm going to get help. We're going to go get counseling, or I'm going to read books, or I'm going to go talk with somebody, or whatever it takes. I'm going to work hard to become a better spouse, and I'm going to ask you to help me. These things you're seeing in my life, let's talk about those each week so that I can get better and better and better at this, because I need to grow in this area of my life. It's a risky thing, isn't it? It's a risky thing to love in that way, because that's really what it is love. John 13:35, I give you a new command, love one another. In the same way that I have loved you, love one another. This is how everyone will recognize that you are my disciples, when they see the love that you have for each other. And friends, in your notes, you'll see that God's will for your life begins and ends in love. If you don't have this kind of loving relationship in your life, you're missing out on being able to fully recognize God's will for your life. One of the greatest gifts of love given to me last year when I was talking to one of my micro-community friends. And I was talking to them about a challenge that we were having in our family. And I was explaining the situation and blah, 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 blah. And I paused and kind of, waiting for a response. And there's a little bit of silence. And on the other end of the phone, you know what he says? He goes, "Jon, you are being a jerk." Except he didn't say it that way. He used some more explicit language, if you will. And I didn't like it at all. I was angry with him. I couldn't believe, who would he be to say that about me, right? How rude, how insensitive. And I tried to argue against him, and I realized really quickly I was wrong. I was wrong. And man, I never would have known it if I wouldn't have had this relationship. I never would have known it if I wouldn't have trusted this person. I wouldn't have changed my behavior if God hadn't been speaking to me through this person in my life. Who do you have in your life that can do that for you? Let's pray. God, we're a people who doesn't like to do this. It is hard. And I pray for those here today who are in these relationships already. God, would you strengthen these relationships in our lives? Would you use them this year to make us look more and more like you? Lord, I pray for those who are on the opposite side of this. They haven't experienced that in a long, long time. God, I pray that you would help them to see one step that they can take this week towards this kind of relationship. One step to look more like you by trusting themselves to others. God, would you give them wisdom to choose wisely? Well, we can't trust in everybody, and I pray that you'd give them someone in their life that they can trust. Or maybe someone that they can trust with a simple part of their lives. That they can try that on for size to see what it would look like. God, I pray that you'd honor these relationships. God, I pray that you would give us the courage to confess our faults one to another, that we can be healed. God, I pray that you'd give us the ability to love and to trust that much. God, we love you so much and pray all of this in your holy name. Amen.